My dad's best friend is my boss, and he had it out for me. From the moment Jackson Hart's eyes rested on me, I knew one thing was certain. I wasn't welcomed. That and Jackson looked incredibly attractive. I never noticed his rugged, hardened features until now. It was probably because most of the time the man regarded me as nothing more than a nuisance. Stepping forward, I flashed a smile. Please, I want to help with the summer harvest and I should trust Dan O'Neil's lazy brat son because... I blinked surprised. He still thought of me that way. It had been 10 years. I did some growing up and clearly wasn't the hooligan teenager he remembered. I think you have it wrong. I'm here to help with the farm place. Well, I don't need your help. I already know you'll figure out some way to get out of work. Or maybe you're trying to kill me like last time. I freeze, still remembering when it happened. I left the gate open, a bull escaped, and Jackson nearly died. He told me to never come here again. Okay, I knew I was a pill, and what I did could have hurt him, but I've done a bit of growing up. A lot, actually. I went to college, realized it wasn't for me, dropped out, went to a trade school, and now I'm trying to find my place in life. Jackson's cold, handsome eyes stared at me. I hated that he looked so attractive. The man was becoming a silver fox, especially in his early 50s. He rocked the gray hair and stubble, making him look even more alluring than before. Still, I had to clear the air. I understand. But Dan recommended me, wasn't it? He folded his arms. I noticed the muscles bulging out. And what if he did? I'm here. I want to work. Give me a chance. I'll be more mindful. And you won't try to kill me this time? Jackson maintained the same neutral frown as before. I braced myself, expecting to be turned down. Instead, he walked over. His domineering, overbearing, and grumpy presence combined with his rugged attractiveness. A deadly combo. Our chests touched, and for a moment my heart skipped a beat. Not out of excitement, but slight fear. I'll give you 1 week to prove your worth. If you can't help me with this farm, you're gone. I better not see a single gate open. Got it? I nodded, crystal clear. He grabbed my chin and forced me to look up. Good. Let's see if you learned a thing or two these recent years. I don't take kindly to lazy workers. I wasn't who I was when I was a teenager. He pulled his hand away and walked back to the barn. I stood there, taken aback by his action. Jackson was mean, cold, and uninviting. However, there was something about him that made me want to stay. Was it attraction, fear, or a desire to prove something? Either way, I welcomed this challenge. I'd deal with whatever Jackson gave to me, all while looking for a new, better job. The next day, I took the feed out to the cattle and placed it in the trough. Then, I walked back, meeting Jackson's cold, unfazed gaze. Do you need something? No. Did you feed the cattle right? Yes, I just did. And close the gate? Those are some high-quality cattle. And if you mess this up, I looked up and met his beady gaze. Mustering a smile, I fought this disdainful gaze the only way that I could, with a friendly energy. I'm doing my job. You can trust me, Jackson. Can I? You might forget, and then that leaves work for me. I wasn't some kind of idiot. Just because I worked here one summer because my dad insisted, and I screwed up, that didn't mean that I was the same man I was now. Walking closer, I met his hardened gaze with a confident smile. You don't need to worry. I've got this, Jackson, and I'll prove it to you. He didn't respond. I turned and walked back to the pasture. Once the cattle were done eating, I brought them to the pasture to graze. The entire time, I watched as Jackson's eyes followed me. He looked for something, any sort of weakness. Despite his cold-hearted behavior, I liked this. Showing his handsome, no-nonsense face that I was dedicated would help with the awkward tension between us. And maybe we could iron things out. 2 days later, I worked over the next couple of days on the farm. Jackson spoke little to me, but I caught his hardened gaze on me more times than I could count. It wasn't that he hated me, more like he was studying me. Sometimes behind that annoying stare, I saw something else. Curiosity. A couple of times, I thought I was hallucinating, that he was checking me out. Besides, before I could question his methods, he looked away. I had to be imagining things. But the problem was I liked the idea of him watching me. Why did I want Jackson to look at me like that? I mean, he was old enough to be my dad. That was wrong on so many levels. Was it because I knew he worked hard and took care of this farm? Maybe so. Or maybe I sensed there was something deeper behind those piercing blue eyes. You know, maybe there's hope for you after all, Jackson exclaimed. I nodded. Or maybe you're opening up a little. He shook his head. Don't push your luck. You are more responsible. Dan did recommend you, but he didn't say you looked like this either. What did he mean by that? Those cold, penetrating eyes looked me over, and I sensed something more. People change. Dad wanted me to help. He did. And you being here helps me. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. Many things I'm trying to fix before they get worse. I wonder if I can do it myself. But with you around, maybe there's a chance. I'll do my best. Remember, we're a team. True. His simple acceptance sent a flutter to my heart. I knew it was wrong for me to feel like this to Jackson. Yes, it was. He was older. And yet, I was fascinated by him. I knew he was too. Later that night, as I was about to leave, rain poured down. Jackson looked at me, and I shrugged. I'll be fine. It's just a storm. And lightning flashed across the window. The thunder roared, practically shaking the house. And that's when Jackson paused, his face paled at the revelation. We need to go outside. What? Why? I left the bull and a couple of heifers outside. Crap. We did. We left them there because the rain wasn't supposed to be bad. Running outside, the deluge soaked me instantly. I persevered, following Jackson to the pasture. I need those cows. If they die... He didn't finish that sentence. He didn't need to. Following Jackson's lead, we grabbed the cattle and worked together to bring them inside. It was not easy. I wouldn't even call it hard. It was an ordeal. One that made me question if I would ever make it out there. After we got the last cattle inside, he closed the door. I caught my breath, leaning forward. Droplets of water fell on my brown hair. We did it! A pair of warm hands wrapped around me. What the... Why is Jackson touching me? He held me there for a moment. I thought he did this because he was worried about the cattle. He stayed there for a long time, and the warm, permeating scent of both sawdust and chestnuts wafted through the air. I like this, but this feels wrong. Jackson was my boss, not my boyfriend. As quickly as it happened, Jackson moved away. I wrestled myself from his grasp, though I didn't want to. We looked at each other, neither of us saying a word for what felt like forever. Jackson, why did you... It's nothing, Cody. Don't worry about it. Thanks for helping me. Of course. Why did you hug me, though? He stared at me with a guilty, almost smoldering gaze. At that moment, his body looked even more arousing. I don't know. Don't think anything of it. Okay? It was wrong of me to do. Realizing there was no sense in trying to question it further, I nodded. All right? He stormed off, looking frustrated at me. Himself? It was hard to tell. A week had passed since the barn incident, and the awkward tension between Jackson and me only grew stronger. It wasn't that I didn't like him. It was just complicated. That day as we carried out the new saddles for the horses, our hands accidentally touched. A spark shot through me, thrilling yet deeply unsettling. For a brief moment it felt like something forbidden, but irresistible. Jackson pulled his hand back quickly, his face unreadable. Let's hurry up. We're on a tight schedule, he said abruptly. The moment was over quickly as it began, leaving behind a lingering, confusing warmth. Why did Jackson act this way? Did he have some kind of reservation about this, too? Well, yeah, he did. He always looked away, or got angry with me every time there was any semblance of a flirty gesture. We both refused to accept those feelings because of how wrong it was. Something had to give. At some point, one of us needed to confront the other. Nighttime rolled around. I got ready to leave when Jackson stepped out of his tiny kitchen, 2 cups of apple cider in hand. Heading out? Yes, I plan to. Want to have some cider? After that, I'll let you go. It did sound good, and Jackson made it himself. Not only did this guy raise cattle for milk and meat, but he also raised goats and had his own orchard. There he made a variety of drinks, wines, and preservatives, using his fruit. This guy was a one-man farmer army, and I didn't know how the hell he did it. We walked outside and sat on the porch. The recent rains provided lush, green grass in certain areas. Crickets chirped, and lingering fireflies flew about. Turning to Jackson's face, I noticed it immediately. His wavering glance. I took the cider from his hands and sipped it quietly. We sat there in silence, the tension growing palpable. Finally, Jackson took a deep breath, clearing the otherwise tense air. "You've done well these last 2 weeks. Cody, I didn't even need to reprimand you. You could just say I did a good job, I muttered. Jackson always had his way of being a cold boss, but in reality, he had some form of care behind his words. Jackson turned to me, eyes meeting mine. "You've done a great job, Cody. I'm proud of you." I smiled, relishing the compliment, a rarity for this man, but I liked it. "Thanks. I mean it. I know I've held that moment in the past over your head, assumed you had it out for me, but I guessed wrong. You were. I'm not the same punk ass." Jackson turned to me with stormy eyes, before closing the distance, his hand extended with the slightest of touches against my hair. At first the touch felt electrifying, like static electricity. I jerked away slightly but then relaxed, enjoying the touch. "You've grown into a fine young man. I like this side of you. I like you. A lot." His words had the energy of a proud father, but something more. Before I could respond, he closed the distance and kissed me. I froze, unsure of what to make of the lip lock. Why is Jackson kissing me? He couldn't. Jackson pulled away as soon as I had the thought. He sat back and cleared his throat, looking away. Damn it, not again. Jackson, I shouldn't have done that. It was wrong of me to do that. No, he shouldn't have. All logic pointed to such. But I liked it. It felt refreshing. The faint smell of cedarwood lingering on my lips. I don't mind it, if that's what you're worried about. I can't, Cody. Go. Just go. To think Dan entrusted me with helping you get back on your feet. And this is how I repay him? Jackson got up and retreated back to the house, slamming the door with a thud. I know where he's coming from. I'm only working here because my dad recommended it. He helps Jackson with his sales, and if he finds out, great. He just made everything way more awkward. For the next 2 weeks, it was just more of an awkward push and pull. I hated it. I wish Jackson would just tell me how he felt. Was it because I'm Dan's son? Our age gap? I mean, it was weird. I figured we could take things a bit slower, you know? The avoidance worked in our favor until the unruly bull decided that he did not want to listen to me. The animal charged at me. I slipped out of the way at the last second. As the bull hit the wall, it kicked his feet. This wasn't good. It turned, ready to charge me again. It rushed me, adamant about killing. Bracing myself, I was ready to accept whatever fate came my way. When I got it, Jackson pushed me out of the way and grabbed the horns. The bull continued to push forward, and then he turned the creature. It finally hit the end of the fence, settling down. The dust dissipated. It was like that event years ago, except instead of it happening due to my negligence, Jackson risked his own life for me. Why? He had no justification for that. Thank you, Jackson. Our eyes met, and Jackson looked at me with a hardened glance. You're welcome. You should have asked me for help. I didn't want to bother you. You could have been hurt. Died even. Are you crazy? He turned away, huffing. Why would I ask when a bull was what caused you to hate me all those years ago? That's different. You've been avoiding me, Jackson. Why would I bother talking to you if you refuse to even look me in the eye? Ever since that kiss, we barely spoke a word to one another that didn't involve some kind of farm work. It was beginning to drive me insane. At that moment, I vowed not to leave until Jackson told me what the hell was going on. Looking up, a hint of vulnerability flashed across his stoic face. You're right. I'm sorry about that. Why, Jackson? Why do you act like this? He sighed. Because I don't know how to feel about you. I like you, but I feel I'm just betraying Dan. You mean our relationship? Yes, Cody. I crossed a boundary I never should have, and it's been bothering me. So that's what it was. He was guilty of kissing me. Taking a few steps forward, I nodded sympathetically. I get it. I feel the same way. But I'm an adult, Jackson. I know this is weird for both of us, but maybe we should talk this out, like adults. We need to. I smiled, my expression softening. I do like working for you, Jackson. I don't want this to deter our relationship. It won't, but I do agree. Tomorrow night, stay late. We'll talk then. All right. We parted ways. That night, I work a bit later, helping Jackson with some chores around the farm. He made me food as thanks, but didn't stay long enough to talk. Taking things slow, I guess. We'll have the conversation tomorrow, whatever came from it. Whether it was me working here while I waited for the application to come through, or something else, was up to future decisions. Next day, my heart pounded when I came into Jackson's cottage that evening. I've been here a million times. Why am I freaking out? Have a seat. I made us some food. I settled into the seat while Jackson plated out some pork chops, greens, and a slice of bread, and some mac and cheese. Licking my lips, I nodded with approval. You sure know how to cook. I had to learn. After my wife died, I had to take on cooking. That's right. Jackson did have a wife. I remembered she was sick when I worked here. I'm sure that contributed to his stress. You've done a bang-up job, I complimented. Big talk from someone who hasn't even taken a bite yet. I will, I challenged, thrusting a fork of greens into my mouth. They were good. I wasn't screwing around. We ate, making small talk here and there. Jackson asked about college, which was a bit of a sore spot for me. I went for my English degree. But what? It doesn't pay jack. That's why I'm here, honestly. Working for your ranch has been great. Glad you think so. It hasn't been easy for me to keep going, but I do my best. It shows. You do an amazing job, I replied with sincerity. Jackson's eyes softened, and half a smile crossed his lips. That means a lot, Cody. Really. We ate, not touching the minefield just yet. After we finished, Jackson gestured to the barn. Want to go out there and talk? 20 minutes later. The barn was small, quaint even, and felt inviting. We sat on some hay bales as the window showed the stars decorating overhead. The elephant in the room lingered, becoming almost unbearable. Finally, I took a deep breath. Thank you again for taking a chance on me. Working for you has made my life better. I'm glad it has, Jackson said. Again, I'm sorry for that night. I don't know what came over me. Will you stop apologizing, I spat out. Jackson's eyes widened in surprise. Turning to him, I did the boldest thing I think I ever done. I grabbed his hand and squeezed it, looking towards him with a pleading glance. I finally spilt the feelings I wanted to. I liked that kiss last night. It was strange, sure, and I thought it was wrong too. But I liked it a lot, in fact. I'd do it again. He nodded slightly. I want to as well, Cody. But what? What's the problem? Jackson looked up, conflict etched across his face. You're the first person I've been serious with since my ex-boyfriend, who I dated for a few months. 2 years after Linda's death, I'm worried I'm taking advantage of you. You're only supposed to be here to help with summer backlog. But I understand the sentiment, chuckling. I sit back. I get it. It's new for me too. I took the job because I needed something while one of my apps went through. Dad gave me this opportunity, but mustering all my courage, I faced Jackson. It was now or never. I grabbed his hand and held it tightly. I like this. We can take it slow. Touching you feels magical, and I like how dynamic. Working for you has made my life better. So, yes, I like you. We can go at your pace, so you don't feel guilty. Jackson hesitated. I'd like that. He looked in the direction of the cows, barely hanging on with this farm. The ranch was the one thing I promised Linda I'd keep going. Bills are piling up, and I'm running on fumes. We only have till the end of the summer to catch up. It was a lot. Jackson needed this. However, he needed me. Then, I'll help with that. And, in turn, maybe we can figure out these feelings. I know you're worried about my dad, but I like what we have. Jackson nodded. Sounds good to me. Instinctively, I pulled Jackson in for a heated kiss. Jackson's cedarwood scent penetrated my nostrils. My hands touched his muscular body, feeling the muscles that still lingered from the lifelong farm life. This feels right. I like this. Lost in the kiss, Jackson and I deepened it. Before I knew it, he pressed me against the hay bale, our eyes locked, and my breath hitched. Care for a roll in the hay? Grinning, I nodded. I thought you'd never ask. Was the first night I ever shared with Jackson. The first of many to come. 2 weeks later, Jackson and I didn't date like a normal couple per se, but he would do little things around the farm, make me dinner, walk me around the orchard, spending time with me as I put up the cattle. One evening, We went out with the horses to the creek on the edge of his property. The bubbling brooks relaxed me. He set up a blanket, and that night, we had a picnic under the stars. I like what we have. I do too, Cody. We sat in a pleasant silence until Jackson turned, his expression concerned. Cody, there's something I wanted to ask you. What is it? He clutched my hand. Do you plan on staying? I pursed my lips. Well, I hoped one day I'd find something, but so far, nothing. It wasn't like any job application went through so far. I've been sitting in limbo. Yeah, I do, Jackson. There's not much else. And I like farm work. This job made me realize how much it means to me, and I like what we have. Jackson smiled. A rarity for him. Good. I appreciate it. This is the happiest I've ever been since Linda was alive. In the end, I wasn't all that happy. The medical bills piled up, stressing me out. There's the matter of your dad, but it feels like the beginning of something new. It does. And I'm excited for this adventure, especially since it means something to you. I meant every word. Jackson and my relationship changed for the better. Our lips crashed together in a kiss that wasn't lust-driven, but something more. The next day, things were great until we left the barn. Standing there was my father looking at us. Dan? What are you? Jackson, I saw what you did. You kissed him. We did. Right as we left, Jackson snuck a peck. And if I did, I trusted you. I can't believe this. I can't believe you either, Cody. I gave you this opportunity. There was no way my father believed that Jackson took advantage of me. Dad, please, no. I'm done. You're not working here anymore. Dad stormed away. I felt like my life was crashing down, just as things were getting good. The night, it got worse. A new email showed up from my dream job, working as a professor in Japan. I put in the application. I never thought I would hear about it. My father mentioned he might use his connections. After what happened earlier, I had a feeling he was behind this. He knew he couldn't stop me from working for Jackson or seeing him. Not really. So this is the way he chose. I could never. He would stoop so low in his anger. I wanted to travel and teach abroad, and as I read the message, a mixture of emotions settled through me. With a sigh, I told them I'd come for the second part of the interview. Guilt washing over me. This felt wrong. This felt stupid. But this was what I wanted. Or was it? A week later, I avoided Jackson, growing distant. The interview wanted to see me tomorrow, during the time that I worked. That evening, as I was about to leave, Jackson stopped me. Cody, what's the matter? You tell me, he accused. What's going on? It's nothing. I brushed off. That's bullshit and you know it, he snapped. I gazed into those blue eyes devoid of emotion. Only anger resonated. You haven't stayed after all this week. You've been avoiding me like the plague. It's not you. Then what is it? Is it Dan? Is it because of him? I looked up at him. It might be time to get things off my chest. No, it's because of me. Jackson's eyes widened. What do you... I'm quitting, Jackson. At the end of the month, I'm sorry. He stood there, his hands in tense fists. Jackson pushed the emotions away, but I could see it in his eyes. I see. What changed? I got a job offer, teching in Japan. Dad, he helped me get this. He turned away, averting his gaze. He was upset, but maintained composure, so I wasn't upset. Do you want to go? Yes. Or do I? I stood there hesitant. I do. This is my dream come true. Very well. Do what you feel is right. Okay, if you want. I can help you with the cattle and... I've got this. You can quit now if you want. I'll do this on my own. His words filled with tension I wasn't used to. I'm sorry, Jackson. It's fine. No sense in holding you back. This is what you wanted. I tried to form a response, but not a single word came out of my mouth. Sighing with frustration, Jackson turned and slammed the door behind me, closing the door on our relationship. A week later, the interview was great. They wanted me to come out during the first year, to leave this life behind. I didn't want to. It felt wrong on so many levels. Jackson never called me back. I knew I had hurt him on an unforgivable level. And believe me, I wouldn't have done it either. I gathered my stuff, realizing that I left my hoodie at the farm. I should go get it. As I pulled up, I saw an orange ember. A fire! I quickly rushed inside. The fire came from one of the side treatment areas. An electrical fire that quickly spread, Rushing around, I looked high and low for him, for Jackson. Jackson, where are you? The fire grew stronger, and smoke ate at my lungs. I refused to give up. I need to find him. The barn. He had to be there. That's where the cows were. I made my way over there. The embers grew stronger. Just as I got inside, I heard a crash. Jackson! Here. It was faint enough for me to work off of. I followed the voice, seeing Jackson on the ground. A board sat over him. The flames inched closer, threatening to kill him. I've got you, I promise, I gently reassured. Grabbing his body, I pulled with all my strength. After some work, the boards loosened. I dragged him away from the fire. Everything collapsed, but I sighed with relief. Jackson was safe. The roar of sirens followed. Firemen came through. The paramedics checked on all of us. I stayed with Jackson. It felt right. And deep down, the realization made it obvious. I loved him, and I never wanted to let him go. An hour later, the bright lights of the hospital greeted Jackson when his eyes opened. Where am I? The hospital. The farm's okay. It was an electrical fire. The cattle are safe, with only a couple of casualties. Jackson nodded. Not the bull? I smiled. Not the bull. Good. Neither of us said anything. Taking a deep breath, I spoke. Jackson, I'm sorry for what I said. For leaving you. I get it. You have your own life, and I have mine. But that doesn't mean it's what I really want. Gathering myself, I sighed. I love you, and I felt so guilty for leaving you afterwards. Sure, I aced those exams, and I said all the right things, but I don't want to leave you. I meant it. Jackson showed me something I'd never experienced before. He didn't say anything, which encouraged me to go on, because I love you, Jackson. I know the rebuilding process will take some work, but I want to stay. I don't want to leave you. But what about your teachings? I'll get a job at some school or tutoring. I don't want to throw this away. Jackson chuckled. I'm glad you think so. We have a lot of work to do. With the fire, we'll have to ramp up production and pray we have enough by the end of the season. I'm sure we can work on it. I'll spend more time here, and I'll do what it takes. I'll talk to my father, explain the situation. Are you sure? He seemed upset. I nodded. I'll help him understand. I know this is where I want to be. It wasn't because of Jackson. The farm evolved into something more, something magical for me. I loved it. It reignited my passion for animals, another love that I have had for a long time. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, Jackson smiled without saying anything. Finally, he interrupted our pleasant silence. I love you too, Cody, and I'm glad you chose to stay. We kissed in the hospital, a declaration of love and dedication to each other. Staying with Jackson was the move. He meant something to me, something special. I promised him I'd stay until he got better. Working around the farm as he recovered, he broke a couple of ribs and popped his shoulder out of his socket. My dedication to helping him meant the world to me. Jackson wasn't just my boss. He was my life. Conclusion. True to my word, I stayed on the farm. I talked to my dad, and he eventually came around. Supporting my decision, we got the ranch's finances in order. It was saved. Jackson and I managed to take a few trips together, allowing for him to explore the world around him. The ranch was rebuilt and expanded over the past 2 years, and he became one of the top ranches in the country. At the top of Tokyo Tower, looking at the city, he turned to me. You sure showed this countryman a new life. Sure did. That's when it happened. He got on one knee and asked me the most important question. Would I marry him? Of course, I said, and together we lived happily ever after, with the farm that was ours. The end. Have you ever pushed away feelings of desire for someone? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.